The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent, as the long chamber of glass and silver metal glowed under the pale light of 1,000 stars. Leaders of many worlds sat in tall seats shaped like thrones, their voices gone quiet, because a new message had arrived, and even before the words were read aloud, there was a sense of unease moving through the air like a storm that no one could yet see. The report spoke of humans, a species many in the chamber had once considered weak, fragile, and unworthy of great wars. But now the whisper of fear spread from one council seat to another as the truth of the message became clear. Humans were preparing for battle. Not just small fights, not just border defense, but something far greater. High Chancellor Vorth, whose scaled body shone with blue and green under the starlight, tried to calm the council, his deep voice echoing as he claimed that humans were still too small, too divided, and too fragile to bring fear to the galaxy. But others did not agree. One of them was Kael'thar, a commander of the Zyran fleet, a veteran of many wars. His single red eye burned like fire as he stood and raised his hand, saying that humans had always been underestimated, that every time they were cornered they showed strength beyond logic. He reminded the council of how humans fought in old skirmishes when colonies were raided, how they never surrendered, and how their dead seemed to fuel the fire of the living. The council chamber filled with murmurs. Some laughed at Kael'thar, calling him a fool for believing in myths. But he remained unmoved, his voice sharp like a blade as he said the humans had learned from every war, from every defeat, and that now they were building something new. He spoke of rumors, whispers carried across the trade lanes, that Earth had turned its cities into factories, that the noise of machines never stopped, that endless lines of ships were leaving their home world silent. Shadows at first, but now too many to ignore. Some called these rumors lies, but fear grew in the hearts of the counselors. Meanwhile, far from the chamber, human worlds were awake with restless energy. Commander Elias Ward stood at the edge of a vast hangar filled with war machines, his eyes cold as steel as he watched soldiers and engineers moving like parts of one living machine. Above them, the skeletons of great ships hung suspended in docks. Sparks of welding light danced like tiny stars as new hulls were sealed. Elias thought of the future, of what awaited them beyond the void, and he knew that hesitation was death. He ordered that no ship should rest, that no worker should stop, because time was not their ally, and because the galaxy would not wait for them to be ready. Back in the council chamber, a scout ship report arrived, its messenger trembling as he placed the data crystal in the center of the hall. Images flickered into the air, sharp and bright, and the whole chamber gasped. There were fleets, not one, not two, but many human ships in formation, hundreds moving together with banners of blue and white and red shining against the black of space. Each ship carried weapons that seemed simple yet deadly, railguns, missiles, torpedoes, but the number was what terrified the council most, because it was not one fleet rising, it was many, and behind them more could come. The council erupted in chaos, voices shouting over each other, some demanding war, others calling for peace, some screaming that humanity should be crushed before it was too late, while others whispered that maybe humanity was too strong already, and striking them now would only bring doom. Kael'thar stood once again, raising his single hand until the voices began to soften. He said that the galaxy had grown soft, that they had grown used to long peace, while humans had never stopped preparing for the next fight. He said that humans carried battle in their hearts, not for conquest but for survival, and that survival was the strongest force of all. Elias on Earth prepared his soldiers. He walked among them, each one in armor that gleamed like black stone. He spoke to them not with promises of glory, but with the simple truth that they fought for their home, for their children, and for the right to stand free among the stars. The soldiers answered with steady voices, no fear in their eyes, only a quiet fire that spread like a chain through every line of men and women. Machines stood ready, towering walkers waiting to be unleashed, drones humming in the shadows, and ships above ready to launch into the night sky. Whispers spread across the galaxy faster than any fleet could travel. Smugglers told of strange movements on human borders. Traders swore they had seen convoys filled with weapons instead of food. Spies sent secret notes of massive drills taking place on barren moons. Some dismissed these stories. Others trembled, and the council grew restless, unable to sleep, unable to dismiss the truth that was slowly becoming too large to hide. Kael'thar whispered himself in the chamber, his single red eye fixed on the images of human fleets. He knew that soon the galaxy would learn what humans truly were, not prey, not weaklings, but warriors of endless resolve. And he feared that by the time the council understood, it would already be too late. Because the humans were no longer whispering, they were marching, and when the march began, nothing would stop it. The great chamber fell silent again as the stars outside burned cold and distant. Every leader felt the same question clawing at their hearts. What would happen when humanity finally stepped forward in the war that none of them had expected, a storm that could sweep across the stars? And as the image of human fleets grew brighter above their heads, not one of them could answer, not one of them could find peace. And the silence of the chamber became heavier than any shout. The black of space was never truly silent, for signals moved unseen, whispers of code and fragments of voice crossing the void faster than light. And among these signals, many spoke of humans, of ships forming, of armies preparing, of a storm that grew stronger with every passing hour. Across the trade routes, merchants carried tales that no one could dismiss. They spoke of war songs echoing from human ships, songs filled with strange power that stirred even alien hearts, songs that spoke of loss and defiance, of blood and hope. And though no alien fully understood the meaning, they felt the weight of it. They felt that humans were not just preparing for war. They were promising it. On the frozen moon of Athelion, where the wind cut like blades and the skies never cleared, the Zyran commander Kael'thar walked across the battlements of his outpost, the crimson of his single eye glowing in the dark as he looked to the stars. He had ordered spies to watch the humans, and their reports were now piled in his chamber like a mountain. Each one carried news of more fleets, more soldiers, more machines. And though many leaders still laughed at the danger, Kael'thar could no longer laugh. He could only prepare, for he had seen wars before, and he knew the shape of a storm when it began to form. Meanwhile on Earth, Commander Elias Ward stood inside a war council room built deep beneath the mountains, the air heavy with smoke and tension. Holograms glowed in the center showing countless ships and routes, each marked with signals of red and blue. The human leaders spoke in sharp voices, some urging caution, others calling for immediate strikes. But Elias stood calm, his voice steady as he told them that fear had no place here, that hesitation would only kill them, and that the galaxy was already against them. So they had no choice but to march, for waiting would mean chains, and humans had never worn chains without breaking them. Factories thundered day and night, skies filled with fire as new engines roared to life. Docks swarmed with workers welding hulls of steel, and the ground trembled under the weight of walkers and tanks rolling out of hidden vaults. Children watched the skies and pointed as great carriers rose like mountains from the oceans, their decks filled with fighters waiting like hawks ready to strike. And even in the quiet towns far from the cities, the people knew. They felt it in the air, in the whispers of soldiers passing by, in the letters written home, in the endless rumble of machines, that their world was no longer the same, that it had entered a path that could not turn back. Across the stars, the council tried to hold control, but the fear inside their chamber grew sharper each day. Some races began secret pacts, others sent fleets to watch their borders, and some even considered fleeing to deep space to escape what they believed was coming. Yet no one dared to speak aloud. No one dared to say that humans were no longer prey. No one dared to admit that they might be stronger than all the council combined. Instead, they wrapped their fear in denial, in empty words, in false hope. But denial could not stop the march that had already begun. Kael'thar called his officers together. He told them to strengthen their fleets, to sharpen their weapons, and to prepare for a war that would not spare anyone. Some of his officers mocked him, calling humans reckless fools, but he silenced them with one look of his burning eye. He told them that he had fought enemies before, and none had ever carried the fire he now saw in humanity. He told them that if they underestimated humans, they would not live to regret it. And though his words were harsh, many listened, many began to see the truth. Back on Earth, Elias walked among his soldiers. He saw them trained with rifles and blades, with heavy armor and light drones. He saw them fight in simulations that burned with bright fire, each soldier moving as if they were one body, one mind, bound together not by fear of death but by belief in survival. He felt pride but also sorrow, for he knew that many would not return. Yet he also knew that their sacrifice would make the galaxy remember, that no one would ever again call humans weak, fragile, or unworthy of the stars. Night came over Earth, yet the world did not rest. Lights burned across every horizon. Smoke rose like banners into the sky, and the hum of engines became the new heartbeat of the planet. The march had already begun. Even if no ship had yet crossed the stars in battle, and the galaxy felt it, traders reported seeing entire sectors dim as human fleets gathered power grids and drained resources. Smugglers whispered that the humans were building weapons never before seen, and spies tried to speak of secret projects hidden in the deepest vaults, though none of them lived long enough to tell all the details. In the dark halls of the council chamber, the leaders gathered again, their voices sharp with anger and fear. Some wanted to strike now, to crush humans before they grow stronger. Others feared that striking now would only wake the storm fully. Kael'thas spoke once more, his voice cutting through the noise. He told them that it was already too late, that the humans were no longer hiding, that they were already on the march, and that the galaxy had two choices, either to fight them and face fire or to accept them and face change. Yet the council could not agree, and the chamber dissolved into chaos. Elias in his mountain council chamber placed his hand on the cold steel table, his eyes locked on the stars above. He whispered to himself that the galaxy was not ready, that they did not see the truth, and that soon they would learn. His soldiers stood behind him, their armor glowing in the dim light, their faces hard yet calm, ready to follow him into fire, ready to write their story into the stars, ready to show the galaxy that humanity did not crawl, humanity did not beg, humanity marched. And so the night stretched on, both on earth and in the halls of the council, heavy with silence, heavy with fear, heavy with a storm that none could stop. The humans stood at the edge of destiny. The galaxy stood at the edge of terror, and the march was about to begin in full, a march that would shake the stars themselves. The stars looked calm, but nothing was calm, for whispers spread like fire across every world, carrying the weight of fear and rumor. And in those whispers the word human burned brighter than any other. And across the trade lanes, crews whisper of fleets that vanished without trace of patrols, that found empty husks of ships stripped and torn, as if some shadow had passed through them, leaving nothing behind but silence. And yet always there was a mark of voices strange, echo that seemed to cling to the wrecks, a human voice carried in the black that made even hardened mercenaries tremble. Commander Elias Ward stood aboard the great carrier Resolute, its hull newly forged, its decks alive with the sound of engines and boots, and above him stretched the endless void that soon would be filled with fire, and he felt the weight of what was coming heavy like chains on his shoulders, yet his eyes never broke. He told his captains that fear was natural, but surrender was not. He told them that the galaxy did not know what it had awakened, and that humanity had only one road forward to walk it, together to march, without end, to strike without pause. On the far side of the galaxy, the council chamber shook with argument, voices clashing like steel blades. As races fought to decide what should be done, some cried that humans must be destroyed before their fleets could launch. Others warned that any strike might ignite a war that no one could control. And in the midst of it, Kael'thas, the Zyran commander, sat silent, his eye burning, his hands folded. And when the voices grew too loud, he rose, his voice like thunder. He told them that the time for choice was gone, for humans were already moving their ships, already rising from their seas, their songs already echoing across the void, and he warned them that if they fought now, they must be ready for war unlike any they had known. In the streets of alien worlds, fear grew like root shops closed, early markets emptied, and whispers turned into cries. Many races had believed humans weak, fragile, bound to a small blue world. Yet now they saw humans building ships larger than cities, their engines glowing like suns, their soldiers standing with eyes of steel. And many began to question whether the council could protect them at all. Some even began to ask in hushed tones if it would be wiser to join the humans before the storm, then to stand against them when the storm broke. The Resolute drifted among her sister's mighty carriers, lined like titans across the dark, their hulls shining with new paint, their decks filled with fighters and drones ready to launch like swarms of starlight around them. Smaller ships gathered, frigates, destroyers, cruisers, all humming with power. And inside, the men and women trained with silent faces, their hearts steady, their minds focused, so they knew that the galaxy was watching and waiting, and they would not allow themselves to falter. Elias walked the halls of his ship, and as he passed, the soldiers rose their fists, striking their chest plates in a rhythm that echoed like a drum across the steel walls. And with each strike came the echo of a vow that they would march, that they would not turn back, that they would stand even to stars themselves burn away. And Elias knew then that they were ready to face what was coming, ready to carve their story into the heavens. Across the border world, strange events began. Fleets sent to patrol never-returned colonies found their skies filled with shadows, and in the wreck, survivors spoke of hearing voices, human voices, whispering in the black, voices filled with promise, and threat, voices that carried both fear and hope, and many began to believe that humans were already striking in secret, testing their enemies, softening the stars before the great fire began. Kael'thas returned to his stronghold on the frozen moon, his officers demanding action, his people fearful of invasion. And though he was a warrior who had faced many enemies, he felt something strange now, a weight that pressed upon his chest, a sense that the humans were not like those before. They were not bound by pride alone, not by hunger alone, but by something deeper, something that made their march unstoppable. And though he sharpened his blades and readied his fleets, he whispered in the cold halls that even steel might break against fire that does not die. Elias stood before his admirals gathered in the command hall, their holograms glowing with fleets, their voices sharp. With plans some spoke of striking first into council space, others urged defense and waiting, but Elias silenced them with a single command. He told them that humans would not hide behind walls, that they would take the march to the stars themselves, that they would meet the council not with begging words, but with steel and fire. And as his voice echoed, the admirals bowed their heads, knowing the truth had been spoken. In the black between stars a storm gathered, unseen fleets, moving shadows growing. And though no battle had yet begun, the galaxy felt in their bones like thunder before lightning. They knew war was coming, and no voice could stop it, no treaty could delay it. The march was alive, and it was moving. On Earth, children still played in the fields, but they played at war, their voices rising in songs that echoed the soldiers above them. Families built shelters deep in the ground, yet their hearts burned with pride that their people were no longer bound. In the skies, the carriers lifted higher, their engines roaring, as if the planet itself was shouting into the stars. Yet in the heart of the council chamber, a secret vote passed, hidden in shadow, for some feared too greatly and chose betrayal. They sent a message in silence to a fleet hidden in the dark, a fleet meant to strike the humans before their march could begin in full, a fleet armed with weapons forbidden even by the council itself, weapons of shadow and fire. And that fleet began to move silent and unseen toward the human lines. And as the night fell on Earth, Elias looked at the stars, unaware of the blades already moving against him, his voice steady, as he told his soldiers that tomorrow they would begin to march. Tomorrow they would show the galaxy that humanity had risen, and that no force could stop them. Tomorrow the storm would break, and the stars would never be the same. The night was quiet in the black sea above the border world, yet silence never lasts for long when shadows move. And in that night the hidden fleet of the council glided forward, its ships wrapped in cloaks of false light, its weapons silent, yet burning with power. And at the front of that fleet stood the dread ship Oblivion, a vessel made not for defense or peace, but only for ruin its core, carrying weapons forbidden by every race in the stars. Inside the command deck of the Oblivion, Admiral Seraph stood tall, his scales glimmering under red light, his eyes hard as stone, and his voice sharp as blades. He told his officers that the humans must be crushed before their march begins, that their spirit must be broken before it grows too strong. And the officers bowed for fear of him. Yet inside their hearts some trembled, for they had heard whispers of human resolve, whispers that no fire, no shadow, no fear could ever break. Far away aboard the resolute, Elias Ward stood at the edge of the bridge, his eyes locked on the stars. He felt the weight of silence, heavier than steel, as if something unseen moved in the black. His gut spoke, like thunder, whispering danger, though no signal came. And his second officer, Miravalon, approached her face sharp with thought. She asked if he believed the council would strike. Before open words were spoken, Elias answered with calm fire. He said, the council feared humanity more than they feared the unknown, and that fear would push them to strike early. The council fleet drew closer, their engines silent, their formation like daggers aimed at the heart of the human carriers, and within the dark their weapons prepared for release, great lances of void fire that could shatter shields. In a single breath, great storms of shadow drones that could consume fleets like locusts. And Admiral Seraph raised his claw to give a command, his voice shaking the bridge. He cried, strike now and burn them before they march. But before the command had echoed across the fleet, the Resolute lit its eyes. The senses of the humans had pierced the dark. Cloaks, a burst of warning, filled the bridge. The council fleet had been found. Elias did not wait. He spoke with fire, launched the wings, opened the guns, let them learn what march means. And the ship roared alive, fighters pouring into black. Like a storm of starlight, guns thundered from the carrier hulls, lances of fire stretched across the void. The council fleet staggered at the sudden blaze, their cloaks ripped away, their formation broken. Admiral Seraph roared in rage, his claws tearing across the command rail. He ordered full fire, and the void lit with storm. The first battle had begun. Fighter clashed with fighter, their trails burning across the black. Human pilots fought with steel nerves, their voices steady in the comms. As they cut through swarms of shadow drones, their cannons sparking like lightning mirror directed wings with sharp commands guiding them into the teeth of the enemy, while the carriers unleashed broadside fire, each blast shaking the stars. Admiral Sareth watched with fury as his weapon struck, yet the humans did not fall. Their carriers shook, but stood. Their fighters bled, but kept flying. Their lines bent, but did not break. And something cold struck his heart, for he saw in their eyes through the screens not fear, but fire that spread from ship to ship, soldier to soldier. And he felt for the first time that the whispers were true, that the march was real. On the deck of the resolute, Elias stood firm, every blast shaking the steel, yet his voice carried calm strength. He told his crew that they were not fighting for survival alone, but for the right to stand free among the stars. And the crew answered with thunder in their voices, shouting, the march shall not end, the march shall not fall, the march shall not break. The battle raged on the void, torn with fire wrecks spinning into black, as the dead were claimed by silence. But the humans pressed harder, their fighters striking deeper their ships, refusing to break formation, until the council fleet began to waver, cracks forming in their disciplined voices of fear whispering through their comms, and Admiral Sareth knew the tide was slipping. He ordered the release of the forbidden weapon. The core of the oblivion pulsed with dark light, a sphere of shadow forming in his heart, a weapon designed to unravel matter itself, to burn both steel and flesh to ash, and his officers looked on with horror. For to use such a weapon meant not victory, but blasphemy against every treaty. Yet Sareth did not care. He cried release, and the weapon began to swell. Across the resolute sensor scream, Mira shouted that something unnatural was building. Elias turned his gaze to the growing storm, his voice steady, as he ordered all ships to focus fire on the oblivion. He said, if that weapon lives, none of U.S. will. And his captains obeyed with iron will. Every cannon turned, every lance fired beams of fire, cutting across the dark, slamming into the oblivion shields. The great dread ship shook under the fire, its hull groaning, its shields flaring like dying suns, yet the weapon continued to grow, its light spreading across the fleet, its pulse shaking the stars, until finally, with a soundless scream, it burst, releasing a wave of shadow fire that swallowed ships, both human and council. Fighters burned like sparks in a storm, frigates tore apart like paper shields shattered, and alarms howled across the decks. The wave ripped across the void, unstoppable, a tide of death, yet in the heart of it, Elias stood unbroken, his voice rising above the storm as he ordered emergency shields to full power, and the crews obeyed, fighting to hold as the darkness consumed the light. The wave passed, leaving wrecks adrift, silence, once more filling the void. Many ships gone, many lives lost yet in the smoke, and ruined humans still stood, their carriers scarred, their fighters bleeding, but still alive, still ready to fight, still burning with the march. Admiral Sareth stared at the wreckage, his heart sinking, for though his weapon had killed many, it had not broken the humans. They still moved forward, their guns still alive, their voices still filled with fire. And in his heart, he felt something he had not felt before, not rage, not victory, but fear, true fear, what humanity was becoming. Elias looked out at the wreckage, his fists clenched. He told his officers that the galaxy would know this day that the council had betrayed them with forbidden fire. But still the humans stood still. They marched, still they lived, and the voice of the march echoed louder across the stars. But even as his words carried hope, Mira whispered that long-range sensors had found something more behind the ruins, deeper in the void, another fleet, larger, darker, moving toward them faster than light itself. And Elias turned his gaze to the endless night, knowing the first battle was only the beginning and that the true storm was still coming. The wreckage of the first clash drifted like broken bones across the stars, and yet silence never lingered long in the void, for new shadows moved beyond the black, and Mira Valen whispered from the sensor pit that a second fleet was coming, larger than the first, its mass like a mountain, its speed like a storm, and her voice carried a chill that gripped every soul aboard the Resolute. Elias Ward stood tall, his hand on the command rail, his gaze locked on the endless dark. Where the second fleet grew closer each second, his crew watched the screens with dread hearts racing, as numbers climbed higher and higher, ships upon ships, more than the first wave, 10 times more. And in that moment the truth struck them. The first fleet was never meant to win, it was meant to bleed the humans. And now the true strike was coming. The voice of fear crept through the bridge, yet Elias spoke with fire, calm and sharp. He told them fear is the enemy, not the fleet before us. We have stood against shadow, and we still stand. We will hold the line, for humanity does not bow. And the crew answered with thunder, their voices one with his words, so their bodies shook, their hearts burned brighter. Far away in the command halls of the council, the great lords watched through hidden eyes, their faces masked with pride. Yet their voices cracked with unease, for the first fleet had failed, and the humans still stood. And now their greatest armada moved to crush the rising flame. Before it spread, and Admiral Sareth, broken and shamed from the last clash, pleaded for command again. But the council denied him, for fear his rage would waste what remained they gave the Second Fleet to Admiral Kale A. Cold-minded planner of silence and shadow. Kale moved with patience, his fleet gliding through the void like hunters. His orders clear surround the humans, trap them within a cage of steel, then break them with fire until no voice remains. And his captains obeyed, for Kale was feared not for rage, but for his unshaken will. The Second Fleet emerged from the dark, their ships vast, their guns burning like suns, their formations stretching wide to close the humans inside a wall of death. And aboard the resolute alarm screamed as Mira called the numbers louder, and louder yet Elias did not flinch, his eyes narrow. He spoke with a voice like iron. He said, "Then we will not wait to be trapped. We strike first, and strike hard." And his captains echoed his fire. The humans moved before the cage could close, their carriers breaking formation with sharp turns, their fighters pouring once more into black, their lances of fire, cutting against the dark. And for the first time, Kale raised his brow, for the humans did not move with fear. They moved with boldness, their march unbroken, their strike, like wolves against the throat of the hunter. The clash was thunder, the void torn with light, fighters clashed like swarms, teeth against teeth, wings of fire dancing through shadow as cannons roared and missiles screamed. Human pilots fought like spirits, unyielding, their voices sharp with steel, and Mira guided them like a blade, her commands slicing the chaos into order. Kale watched from his flagship, calm and cold. He saw the human fire. He saw their stubborn march, yet he did not falter. He ordered the encirclement to tighten, and his ships obeyed, walls of death moving closer, their guns burning brighter, their weight pressing in like the jaws of a beast. And soon the humans would be swallowed whole. On the Resolute, the crew felt the trap closing, every sensor flashing red, every warning crying louder. Yet Elias only gripped the rail tighter, his eyes like fire. He called his captains to link formation. He said the march is not forward alone. Sometimes the march is through the storm, and his ships turned together, their guns facing the closing jaws. The first line of Council ships opened fire, storms of plasma tearing through black, shields burned, fighters fell, yet the humans did not yield. Their guns thundered back, tearing holes in the wall, Myra's voice never wavering, as she called out targets, guiding every shot with deadly aim, and though losses grew, the line held. But Kale was no fool. His calm voice echoed across his fleet strike. Their carriers burned their wings, and the Council warships shifted focus lances, aimed at the Resolute itself, great beams tearing toward the heart of the human march. And the bridge shook alarm, screaming, sparks falling as steel groaned. Yet Elias stood unbroken, his voice rising above the storm. He ordered counterfire, with every gun, every lance, every fighter to shield the carrier. And they obeyed with fire in their hearts, their ships answering with storm, their fighters throwing themselves into the path of beams, dying to shield the carrier. And in that sacrifice the Resolute lived. Still the walls closed tighter, the jaws near shut, and Kale's calm eyes narrowed as he whispered that the humans will fall as all before them fell, yet deep within the chaos Myra's voice cut sharp. She found a breach in the encirclement, a thin line where the enemy shifted too fast. She called out, and Elias seized a moment, his eyes alight. He ordered all ships full burn through that gap now, and his fleet roared with engines blazing. The humans surged forward, every ship at maximum thrust, fighters covering their sides, guns blazing in all directions. The Council ships fired to close the gap, yet the humans punched through their lances, cutting aside the hunters, their engines, screaming against the void until the walls shattered and the march broke free. Kale's calm broke for first time, his lips curling in cold anger. He ordered pursuit, his fleet turned to chase, yet the humans had escaped the jaws, their march alive. Once more those scarred and bleeding, their carriers burning, their fighters few, yet their spirit unbroken. On the bridge of the Resolute silence fell for a moment, only the hum of ruined systems filling the air, and Elias breathed deep, his hand still tight on the rail. He told them, "We live, we march," and the crew answered, though tired, their voices fierce. Humanity had survived the storm. But as they drifted from the wreckage, sensors caught new signals in the void, faint but growing fast. Myra's eyes widened as she read the scans, her voice trembling with awe and dread. She whispered that these were not Council ships, not human either, but something older, deeper, rising from the dark edges of the galaxy, a fleet unknown and vast. Elias turned to the screens, his eyes narrowing as the unknown shadows filled the edge of space. And he knew the march had not yet faced its greatest test. The galaxy was larger than Council and human, and something beyond them both had now awoken. The void was no longer silent. It trembled with shadows that moved like giants, and on the bridge of the Resolute, Mira Valen whispered that something ancient was stirring at the edge of known space, her voice trembling with awe and dread. The scans showed shapes larger than any Council dreadnoughts, their outlines jagged, and strange, their movements smooth yet heavy like the shifting of mountains. And as the crew stared at the screens, a silence of fear settled over them. Elias Ward felt the weight of that silence, yet he did not allow it to linger. His voice rose sharp and steady. He told them we have faced a storm, and we still breathe. We will face what comes with the same fire, for humanity does not break. And the crew answered with faint voices, weary, yet burning with that same fire. The unknown fleet grew clearer with each moment. Massive ships of dark metal shaped in ways no human I had seen before, each vessel alive with strange light that pulsed like the veins of a creature. The colors shimmered in waves of blue and gold and violet, the patterns never repeating, and never still. The sight alone made the bridge crew uneasy, for these ships looked less like machines and more like living beings forged of star and stone. Mira leaned forward, her hands shaking as she traced the signals. She whispered that their energy was beyond anything the Council used. It was older than even the archives of the galaxy itself, and the thought sank deep into every soul on the bridge that what came toward them was not Council, not human, but something from a time before history. Far away, the Council, too, had seen the shadows. The lords gathered in their chamber, voices sharp with fear and doubt. They spoke of legends of a race forgotten by time, exiled to the dark, for their hunger had once threatened all life in the galaxy. They called them the Auric, and their return had always been feared as myth, yet now myth had become real, and the Council, in their pride, realized that humanity was not their greatest threat. Admiral Kale aboard his flagship felt the same cold weight. His calm voice faltered as his sensors filled with the shapes of the Auric. He had hunted humans with precision and order, but now even he whispered a retreat. His captains begged for orders, yet no order came, for even Kale had no plan against the storm that rose from the dark. On the resolute, Mira called out that the Auric fleet numbered in thousands, each ship vast, each ship alive, their signals strong enough to burn through sensors, and as they drew near, the void seemed to bend around them, light itself bending under their power, and the crew fell small as dust before a wave. Elias stood tall, though his chest tightened, for he knew fear threatened to break his people. Yet he would not show it. He told them the Council flees in silence. They have no shield against this foe. But humanity does not flee, humanity marches. And we will find the truth of these Auric, for no matter how ancient, no matter how vast, they will know we stand. The Auric moved without sound, no message, no warning, their fleet spreading across the black in perfect silence. Then without signal, beams of light erupted from their ships, not fire as known by human or Council weapons, but waves of pure energy that tore through Council warships in seconds, shields, useless armor, melting ships of pride, undone in heartbeats, and across the void the screams of fleeing fleets echoed, yet none escaped. Kale ordered retreat, but his commands drowned in chaos. His fleet, broken by the waves, his calm shattered as his flagship shuddered under the Auric strike, and he realized with bitter dread that humanity had been only a distraction. The Auric had returned for the galaxy itself. The Resolute shook his fragment of Council wreckage, crashed around at Myra's voice sharp, as she shouted that the Auric ignored the humans, their fire aimed only at the Council, but she warned that ignorance would not last. Once the Auric finished their slaughter, humanity would face their gaze. Elias listened, and in that moment he saw the chance for humanity to choose. He ordered silence, no weapons, no fire. He told his fleet to watch and wait to learn, for the Auric had power beyond imagination, and to strike blindly would mean death, yet perhaps in their silence the humans could find a path unseen. The Auric continued their storm, tearing the Council apart, ships falling one after another. The galaxy's proud lords reduced to fragments. In minutes their cries for aid unanswered, for no ally dared to stand, and the Council chambers shook as their fleet burned, their voices desperate for salvation, yet none came. Still the humans held their silence, their fleet hidden in the wreckage, Mira guiding them through shadows, engines, dimmed weapons, cold, their eyes wide, as they watched the Auric devour the pride of the galaxy. And through that silence Elias saw what few others could see: the Auric move with rhythm, not chaos. Their waves timed their formations alive, like a living tide. It was not war, it was ritual. The bridge shook again as an Auric vessel drifted near, so vast it blocked the stars, its lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Its surface shifting with patterns that seemed to breathe. The crew froze breaths, held Mira, whispering that if it saw them, they would be undone. Elias raised his hand, silence, no sound, no movement, and the vessel drifted past its light, fading into the dark, once more leaving the humans alive. Relief washed the crew, yet fear remained. The Auric had not spoken, not signaled, not acknowledged their presence, and Elias knew that silence meant only one thing to them: humanity was too small to matter for now. But soon the Auric would turn their gaze, and when that day came, the March would face a storm greater than any before. In the shattered wreckage of the Council fleet, one voice remained: Admiral Kale, his flagship broken, but not destroyed, his transmission weak, yet clear, reaching every corner of the void. He cried that the Council had fallen, that the Auric had returned, and that only humanity stood unbroken. And though his words carried fear, they also carried truth for the galaxy. would soon look to the only force that had faced storms and survived. On the bridge of the Resolute, Myra's eyes widened as she caught new signals, small but clear transmissions from broken council outposts across the stars, voices calling for aid, voices calling for humanity, not for the council, for in their ruin the lords had lost all trust, and only the humans still stood. Elias listened, his hand tight on command rail, his gaze sharp. He told his crew the galaxy sees us now not as prey, not as rebels, but as the last fire against the dark. And though the Auric rise, though the council falls, we will march not for pride, not for conquest, but for survival of all. And the crew roared with voices fierce, their fire reborn. But as the roars echoed, Myra's screen flickered once more, strange signals, deeper still from beyond the Auric, signals, not of ships, not of life as they knew it, but something stranger, something vast stirring even beyond the storm. And she whispered with dread that the Auric may not be the end, but only the beginning. The galaxy shook under the storm of the Auric, yet while their fleets burned across the stars, Miravalon's trembling voice carried a deeper terror, for her screens revealed something stranger than the Auric signals, hidden beneath the waves of their power, faint but steady like a drumbeat from beyond the veil. And she whispered to Elias Ward that something older, something vast, was waking in the deep void. The crew fell silent again, though silence had already become a companion to them since the Auric had arrived, and Elias felt his chest tighten not with fear alone, but with the weight of choice, for the Auric were storms, and whatever stirred beyond them was the sea itself endless. And without shore, he told his crew to stay calm, to keep their eyes steady, because panic would only drown them faster. The signals grew louder each hour, Myra's hand shaking as she traced their rhythm, and she realized they did not move like weapons, they pulsed like a heartbeat, slow, heavy, and constant, each wave stretching across light years, and bending the void itself as if space bent to its will. And though none could say what was, all felt its shadow pressing down. Far away, the council chambers burned in chaos, the lords broken their fleets in ruin. Yet even among their cries, rumors spread of the same signals, voices and whispers calling them the echo of the first ones. And old archives spoke of time before stars, when beings of pure thought shaped the galaxy, then vanished into silence. And now the silence was breaking. Admiral Kale clung to life aboard his shattered flagship, his crew, few his weapons broken. Yet even he saw the rhythm, the shadow beyond the Auric, his heart heavy with the truth that humanity might not be the enemy. He believed, for if the first ones returned, no wall, no fleet, no power would stand against them. On the Resolute, Mira shouted. The Auric had paused their slaughter, their fleets, slowing their beam silence, their vast shapes now turning, as if listening not to the council, not to humanity, but to the deeper signals. Elias narrowed his eyes, for he understood in that moment the Auric were not conquerors. They were heralds, their war not for dominance, but for preparation, clearing the galaxy for something even greater. The crew whispered in dread, their voices low, wondering if survival was even possible against what came, but Elias raised his voice fierce, and steady. Humanity has always been small. He told them humanity has always faced giants and storms, yet we endure, because we refuse to kneel. If the first ones return, then we will not wait for their mercy. We will shape our own. The Auric ships glowed brighter, their lights pulsing faster in rhythm with a deeper signal. Mira gasped as she saw the sink, their ships moving like instruments in a symphony older than stars, and she realized with horror that the Auric were not resisting the signal. They were answering it, and the thought sank deep like ice. The Auric were servants, not masters. In that moment, fragment of council survivors sent their cries to humanity, voices begging for shelter, voices begging for alliance, for even the proudest lords had lost their fleets and had no shield left. Elias listened, yet he gave no answer, for he knew that to tie humanity to the broken council now would mean chains heavier than the Auric. Instead, he ordered silence, once more silence, as their shields silence, as their weapon for in the chaos silence was survival. And the fleet obeyed, engines dim, weapons cold, drifting like shadows among wrecks, watching and waiting. Then the void trembled as the deeper signals surged, and across the black a tear opened, not a ship, not a weapon, but a wound in space itself, light, bending, dark, twisting, as something vast pressed through. Mira cried out as her screens warped, unable to read, unable to measure the scale, for the entity that stirred was larger than worlds, larger than suns, its form unseen, its presence undeniable. Every Auric ship turned their lights burning brighter, their beams rising not in war, but in worship, and the crew of the Resolute understood with hearts cold that the Auric bowed not to their own power, but to the first ones who now returned. The wound widened, stars vanishing behind it, a void deeper than void itself. From within came whispers, not a sound, but thought voices pressing into minds, words without language yet heavy with command. And some on the bridge clutched their heads, tears streaming as alien will press against human thought. But Elias stood firm, his voice rising against it, shouting that humanity does not bow, and his defiance cut through the pressure like fire and frost. The whispers recoiled for a moment brief, but Clear and Mira gasped for the signal, faltered around Elias, as if it was defiance had carved a space of silence in the tide, and she realized that the first ones, though vast and ancient, were not gods, they were minds, and minds could be resisted. The crew steadied their breaths, emboldened by a stand, though fear still chained them, yet hope now flickered, hope that humanity had fire no storm could smother. Admiral Kale heard fragments of these whispers too across the broken void, and though he had once hunted humans, he now whispered to his dying crew that perhaps only humanity could face what comes so they alone carry the fire that even the first ones could not silence. The wound continued to spread, the first ones pushing further their shape unseen, but their presence crushing entire fleets, breaking what little remained of the council, and drawing every Auric into perfect formation, their fleet now a shield around the wound, a wall of living ships, standing guard for their masters. Elias watched and knew the truth humanity was not, yet seeing humanity was hidden still beneath the storm, and that was their only chance to prepare for the war, not a rebellion, not a council, but a survival against God's return. He told his people, this is no longer their galaxy alone, this is our test, our march, not just into battle, but into the heart of the dark itself. Mira whispered, then her voice heavy with dread, that the signals were spreading not just in the void, but in minds across colonies and outposts far from battle humans, and council, alike dreaming of the first ones, hearing their call, feeling their pull, and if their influence grew, then war would not only be fought with ships, but with the soul of every being in the stars. The crew stared at her pale faces, a truth heavier than chains, that war was no longer fire and steel alone, but thought against thought, will against will. And Elias knew the fight ahead would demand more than weapons, it would demand the very spirit of humanity. The bridge trembled as the wound pulsed again, waves of dark light sweeping across space, and Mira cried that another tier was forming far away on the edge of another star system, the first ones opening more doors of galaxy, becoming a web of wounds, and Elias gripped the rail, his voice sharp. We must move, we must march before the web closes. And as his words echoed, the Auric fleet shifted their attention, turning, as if to search their lights, burning brighter the silence of humanity on the edge of discovery. And Mira whispered with terror that if the Auric found them now, the march would end before it began.